Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to be talking today about my Somato-emotional release experience this weekend at the Upledger Institute. So for any of you who don't know what that is, so craniosacral therapy is a type of therapy that was discovered by this really awesome man named John Upledger, who has recently moved on to the next realm and left us with this really amazing, hi, thanks for joining me this morning, left us with this really amazing therapy called craniosacral therapy, which moves into advanced craniosacral therapy into what we call somatic emotional release. So I have been working with people doing somato emotional release, emotionally for many years, probably about 5 years now. And I'm also a licensed massage therapist, so it was really cool to be able to combine this sort of NLP hypnosis thing where your organs are talking to your inner wisdom and your inner wisdom is talking to you, and everybody's having this negotiation contract happening. And you're able to like tap right into your pain in a mental space, but also the tissue is being released at the same time. I had an example of one of the girls that I was working on this weekend where she was trying to have a release and it wouldn't happen until somebody stuck their finger like right inside of her mouth and released her tongue, which is the avenue of expression according to craniosacral therapists. And so as that tissue started to become released, she was able to, I don't want to kind of tell her story, but she was able to express what she needed to be able to express. So it was really cool. All right, so I'm going to spend the next 4 days talking to you about my experience just because it was super awesome. And I'm definitely tired this morning. So for all of my friends who have done TLC, this was a little bit like that, except on the table. So your body is also contorting and releasing, and you're having all these emotional experiences. And also your body's having all these physiological and physical releases as well. It was really, really neat stuff. So where before what I was doing was just sort of releasing fascia and really, people are having emotional releases. Now we're putting it together with the languaging, and that's what I learned this weekend. So day one, the intention of day one was just simply to have multiple hands on one person. So this weekend we worked in groups of 3, and all of us are clinical craniosacral therapists. So we all have a lot of hands-on work. And so 2 people had their hands on me, and my body did this thing where my knees pulled up into my chest, my fists tightened really, really tight, and my elbows, like this. And I felt my face go like, I can still feel all these muscles are still, it's kind of like when you work out and then a few days later you have sore muscles. It feels like that. So my body goes into this super contracted position. I roll over onto my side. Now, it's crazy because as it's happening, you're not, like, I'm not thinking, oh, it's time for me to roll over. It's like, it feels like they're rolling me over, but they feel like I'm rolling over. It's hard to describe. It's like, if you've ever, I don't know, people kind of freak out. Hi, Rosemary. People kind of freak out when I say this if you ever played the Ouija board, because people have really bad connotations with Ouija board. But the idea is both people put their hands on that little thing and it just kind of starts moving and you're like, wow, how come it's moving? That's how it works. So my body flips over onto the side. My chest is now down on the table. My knees are up. And one of the therapists kind of grabbed me in what my body considered to be like the wrong way and took me out of the process. And I was kind of grateful because it was starting to get a little bit nuts. So I lay myself back down on the table and I actually look up at her and I say, listen, I just need you to make sure that I'm safe. And they're like, okay. And so it starts again. My knees pull up into my chest. My fists do this. My face goes like this. Now I'm crying and crying. And suddenly my whole body starts shaking, and all of this, what I guess was maybe fear, I don't know, starts like pounding through me. So now I'm like in this fetal position, face up with my knees like up here, and I'm like shaking at my, I'm crying, and I'm thinking, the conscious thought, which is so wild, the conscious thought that I'm having is, oh wow, this is so cool. I'm having a somato-emotional release. Yay, it's happening. Meanwhile, my body's like, oh, you know, crying and going through this like fit. And then at some point, I mean, it went on for a while, a lot of like shaking and crying and tension. And at some point, my mental head said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I literally, I mean, I'm in the middle of this process, like this, and I open my eyes and I look at the therapist and I kind of do like this, like, that's it, I'm out. I don't want to do this anymore. And I just like looking at her with these eyes, like, oh, please just make it stop. And so, you know, I allowed myself to relax, and I was shaking for like a good 10 or 15 minutes afterwards. And for a moment, I judged myself for bringing myself out of the process. And then later, very shortly after, realized, no, everything, my inner wisdom's in charge. And maybe at that point, with that exercise where we weren't like communicating and I wasn't making any sense of any of it, you know, maybe it was time for me to just experience that and then come out of it. And so it wasn't necessarily, I didn't necessarily need to continue experiencing that position without further processing. And so as I share with you for the next few days, you know, the second day we were doing mouth work, the third day we started actually getting into processing and what is it like to communicate back and forth with, you know, what was actually happening in my body. And so tomorrow is pretty exciting because day one definitely was preparation for day two. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know that all of that contracting up and shaking and uh, all of that was preparing me for what I'm going to share with you tomorrow. So you'll have to join me tomorrow to find out what that was. But it was really, really cool preparation. And I did my best not to judge it and just to say, okay, this kind of wild thing happened. I'm really grateful that this, I got to experience having this somato-emotional release. I got to experience that my body's holding all of this, what felt like tension and maybe fear. And that, you know, I was going to be processing again tomorrow to find out what that's going to be. So that might sound like a little scary to some people listening to what I'm talking about, but let me say I was ready for it. So there were definitely people in the class who didn't have any emotional release like that at all. Their emotional releases were super, super subtle. You know, maybe just a tissue released, or maybe there's just this overall sense of well-being, or maybe they're, you know, maybe a little confused, or all kinds of, and it was interesting to watch how people processed from that moment all the way to the next day, and where they would say, I didn't have an emotional release, but I feel a sense of calmness that I haven't felt before. So it's like, yeah, you actually did experience some kind of emotional release if you're feeling calmer than you did before. So we do our best as the patient to try not to judge ourselves, because the mind really wants to figure things out. And the mind is like, my teacher this weekend wrote on the board analyzing really big, but he wrote ANAL all in capital letters, you know, and that's what we're doing when we're trying to figure all of this out. You know, we're being anal, we're analyzing things, and that doesn't always help. And actually, on the fourth day, when I share the fourth day with you, you're going to find out that my body actually was sharing with me the damage that's caused from worry and analyzing. So I hope to see you for the next 3 days. I'll be sharing, doing videos every day. If you're interested in getting some craniosacral work, having some releases like this, you know, this works on, there was one woman who had a ringing in her ears that was able to be like 95% taken care of. There was another woman who talked about this big hole in her heart that she felt like, at least now she knows what it is, and she was able to figure out kind of how to root it and how to grow from it instead of just have it be this like black hole that was absorbing her. I had this really great experience on the third day that I can't wait to tell you about coming home into my body. And all kinds of really cool things happen, and it happens at the pace that the patient wants it to happen. So nothing's going to happen that is, you know, outside of what you're ready for. Your body is ready for what you're ready for. Your inner wisdom won't let you experience something that you're not ready to experience. And if you are ready to experience it, you will experience it. So if you're feeling like, man, that sounds really cool, I want to do something like that, there's probably a part of you that is ready. So whether it's working with me or whether it's reaching out to the Upper Ledger Institute and finding another craniosacral therapist, do it, you know. What was really cool this weekend for me was the coming together of all the things that I've learned. You know, I've learned hypnosis and psychology and coaching. And then I also have been a licensed massage therapist for 20 years. And I have been studying craniosacral therapy for the last almost 3 years. And so it's really cool to take the craniosacral therapy, the physical therapy, you know, the physical type body manual therapies, the bodywork therapies, and combine them with this psychological, subconscious, emotional process, and have those two things come together and both release together. So, you know, an example that the teacher told this weekend was this woman came in and he just put his hands right on her pelvis, like right where her uterus would be. And he held there for like a minute. And she says, I've already worked on that. I've already worked on that. You know, and he's like, you've already worked on what? And she says, you know, I had an abortion and I already did 2 years of therapy on that. I don't need to do it anymore. And evidently the tissue hadn't been worked through. So you may think that you've worked through these different issues, but you're still holding that stuff in the tissue. The tissue has memory. So make sure you join me tomorrow to find out about how my tissue had memory, because it is absolutely amazing, the somato-emotional release that happened to me on day 2 that I'm going to talk to you about in the next video. All right, thanks for joining me, and if this sounds cool to you, reach out to me. We can have a conversation. I'd be happy to tell you all the details of what happened for me, and we can talk about if this is something that you think you might want to do for yourself. All right, have a great Monday. Bye.